Chapter 18. Post-Reformation Developments. Despite the fact that the Reformers made provisions for divorce and began to write them into their legal codes, the Protestant states of continental Europe made divorce difficult to obtain. In the formulation of their marriage laws, they often referred back to Catholic canon law as a basis for their legislation.
Despite Luther's attack on the canon law, Protestant jurists in the main became advocates for the restoration of the canon law in Protestant lands.
Footnote: cambridge.org/core/journals/law and history review/article/marriage law and the Reformation.
The social structure of society, which saw the family unit as set in the extended family network, combined with the strengthening of parental consent laws both in Protestant and Catholic regions, made divorce difficult to secure.
Footnote: this occurred at the Council of Trent in response to the Reformation.
Among Protestant nations, England was particularly resistant to divorce. The Church of England's resistance to divorce was so strong that the only route to a divorce was via an Act of Parliament, a law voted through by both houses. Not surprisingly, few people had the means or inclination to expose their private unhappiness to the press, the public, and 800-odd politicians. When a divorce law was finally enacted in 1857 and the floodgates were opened, the number of divorces in English history stood at a mere 324.
Footnote: smithsonianmag.com/history/heartbreaking history of divorce.
So even though the Reformation made provisions for divorce and remarriage, tighter civil laws, extended family structure, economic inequality between men and women, the responsibility for raising children, and the size of families were all factors in keeping divorce to a minimum. It is upon this point that researcher J.D. Unwin draws some interesting conclusions about England, along with the Sumerian, Babylonian, Greek, Roman, and Anglo-Saxon societies, as showing the greatest social energies of any cultures that have existed in this world.
When absolute monogamy is the rule, marriage is a means whereby a man secures domestic labor and heirs of his blood. A wife and her children are under the domination of her husband. In the eyes of the law, he alone is an entity. The wife is taught to submit to her husband in all things. It is her duty to serve him and to obey him. No woman may have sexual relations with any other man than with him whom she marries as a virgin. When she is married, she is not permitted to withhold conjugal rights. In an absolutely monogamous society, female chastity becomes desirable for its own sake, for after a while the women accept as a point of honor the restraint imposed upon them by their lords. Over his children also a man has complete power. Among the English, in spite of a consistent outcry by an excited minority, divorce by mutual consent was not in operation. A semblance of the Catholic tradition which the Protestant and nonconformist English had inherited prevented its legal enactment. If, however, the contracting parties to an English marriage were rich, they could secure in the 20th century a divorce as and when they wished, by arranging to break the letter of the existing law. With these two exceptions, the same changes were made successively by the Sumerians, Babylonians, Athenians, Romans, Anglo-Saxons, and Protestant English. These societies lived in different geographical environments, they belonged to different racial stocks. But the history of their marriage customs is the same. In the beginning, each society had the same ideas in regard to sexual regulations. Then the same struggles took place, the same sentiments were expressed, the same changes were made, the same results ensued. Each society reduced its sexual opportunity to a minimum and, displaying great social energy, flourished greatly. Then it extended its sexual opportunity, its energy decreased and faded away. The one outstanding feature of the whole story is its unrelieved monotony.
Footnote: J.D. Unwin, Sex and Culture, Oxford University, 1934, page 381.
The essence of what Unwin found in his extensive research is that the strongest and most prosperous nations were those which commenced with absolute monogamy, with limited to no premarital sex. The husband and father is the lord of the home, and wife and children are in subjection to him. Thus Unwin attributes the vast prosperity of the English nation to its marriage principles of an indissoluble union for life. It is of significant interest that of the nations listed by Unwin, quite a few of them were seen by Daniel in vision: Babylon, Greece, and Rome. Unwin laments that in every case, when the society became prosperous, they relaxed their marriage laws and consequently, within 3 generations, lost their social energy and power to rule. We would not suggest that all of these nations experienced loving family relationships or were devoid of abuse, but simply to observe the correlation between the industry and intellectual advances of a nation and its conservative marital policy. Many have pointed to the prosperity of Protestant nations as being related to their brand of religion. While it is true that there are aspects of the Protestant faith which fostered prosperity, a wider view of history reveals that similar social energies were displayed in pagan nations which held to strict marital guidelines and the indissoluble union of marriage. Protestantism is represented by the Church of Sardis in the list of the 7 churches. It has a name that it lives but is dead, Revelation 3:1. Like its mother, it held the doctrines of the Trinity, Sunday, and the underpinning framework of Neoplatonism, nuanced through a more rigid reliance on the Bible than the authority of popes. As the daughters of Babylon, they would not escape the long arm of its mother, but the Reformation in the areas of marriage, liberating it from celibacy, forged a path for prosperity, not primarily because of its doctrines, but because of its marital policy. We may question how it is that Roman Catholicism, with its emphasis on celibacy leading to a subversion of marriage, could maintain its power for so long. Alonzo T. Jones provides an apt summary of the genius of her power.
As out of the political difficulties of the days of Constantine, the Catholic Church rose to power in the state, so out of the ruin of the Roman Empire she rose to supremacy over kings and nations. She had speedily wrought the ruin of one empire, and now, for more than 1,000 years, she would prove a living curse to all the states and empires that should succeed it. Simplicius, 467 to 483, in whose pontificate the empire perished, when the Heruli, under Odoacer, overran all Italy, deposed the last emperor of the West, appropriated to themselves 1/3 of all the lands, and established the Herulian kingdom, with Odoacer as king of Italy. In fact, the more the imperial power faded, and the nearer the empire approached its fall, the more rapidly and the stronger grew the papal assumptions. Thus the very calamities which rapidly wrought the ruin of the empire, and which were hastened by the union of church and state, were turned to the advantage of the bishopric of Rome. During the whole period of barbarian invasions, from 400 to 476, the Catholic hierarchy everywhere adapted itself to the situation and reaped power and influence from the calamities that were visited everywhere. Alonzo T. Jones, The Two Republics, 1891, page 522.1.
The Roman power uses cunning, deceit, trickery, and skill in grasping for power through the parasitic process of harnessing the power of nations for its own glory. Such a system must ultimately fail, as Revelation depicts the kings of the earth burning this whore with fire. Finally, the world will turn on this insidious power, which has warred against God and the precious institutions of marriage and the Sabbath. France had largely resisted the Protestant Reformation, causing their later revolt from Catholicism to be far more violent and sweeping in its scope, wiping Christianity out completely from its government for the period of the French Revolution. Prior to the Revolution, marriage in France was often controlled and regulated by the Catholic Church. The revolutionaries sought to diminish the influence of the Church and establish a more secular state. In 1792, the revolutionary government issued a decree that transferred the authority over marriage from the church to the state. Civil marriage became the norm, and religious ceremonies were no longer legally binding. The revolutionary government also sought to reshape family structures. The idea of the family as a private, self-contained unit was promoted, and efforts were made to reduce the influence of extended family structures. The emphasis on individual rights and autonomy in marriage reflected the broader revolutionary ideals. Divorce was seen by many as a right, and unhappy marriages were to be liberated. During the period of 1792 to 1803, there were 30,000 divorces in France.
Footnote: lifetakeslemons.wordpress.com/2011/12/22/divorce and the French Revolution.
As the idealism of the revolution waned, accessibility to divorce became harder in France. But the family principles of the French Revolution would not completely disappear. They came to life again in the 20th century, as Protestant countries had grown prosperous, more secular, having greater access to sexual activity, birth control, and women finding greater fulfillment out of the home. These elements, not all of which were bad, provided fertile soil for an attack on the family from secular humanism. As somewhat of a detour, what is fascinating to me is the divided interpretation of Daniel 11:37 by Adventist pioneers.
He shall regard neither the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any god, for he shall exalt himself above them all. Daniel 11:37, New King James Version.
Josiah Litch taught this power was France, while William Miller and Joshua Himes taught it was the papacy.
Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any god, for he shall magnify himself above all. Such a system as is here described was the French Revolution. It was founded in atheism and triumphed in the overthrow of everything which interposed a barrier to their object. Josiah Litch, Prophetic Expositions, Volume 2, page 90.1, 1842. Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any god, for he shall magnify himself above all. In this passage we have a plain description of papacy. William Miller, Miller's Works, Volume 2, page 96.1, 1842.
Both of these positions, when talking about not regarding the desire of women, speak of the attacks made against marriage. We need to consider the importance of Daniel 11:37 and how disregarding the desire of women helped the power described here to achieve its goals in Daniel 11:40 to 45. It was part of the trajectory for this power to get itself into a position to enact the final events of Earth's history. In the case of Rome, it did not regard the desire of women in the sense that its leaders were corralled into a celibate life, or at least claimed this to be the ideal. The French Revolution removed the marriage contract from any connection to God or religion. Through the principles of equality which it espoused, it changed the nature of the marriage relation, ultimately giving the women no security in the relationship. My observation is that the principles of the French Revolution towards marriage are a natural fruit of the Catholic doctrine. As Rome actually undermines marriage even while claiming to uphold it, she produces the fruit that we find in the French Revolution. But we underscore the point that in order for the final movements of the King of the North to succeed, the family unit had to be destabilized through a denigration of marriage. To conclude this chapter, we look at the present state of the world. The world is addicted to sexual pleasure, and the movie industry glorifies fornication and adultery. The internet has quickly destroyed the energies of our present civilization. Every second, 28,258 users are watching pornography on the internet. $3,075.64 is being spent on pornography on the internet. 372 people are typing the word adult into a search engine every day. 13,128 videos are uploaded to Pornhub, just one porn website.
Footnote: Pornhub.com/insights/2018 year in review.
2.5 billion emails containing porn are sent or received. 68 million search queries made related to pornography, 25% of the total searches made on the internet. 116,000 queries are made related to child pornography.
Footnote: webroot.com/au/n/resources/tips articles/internet pornography by the numbers.
The world is in a death spiral. The next generation of men are losing all sense of how to treat a woman because of porn.
Footnote: fightthenewdrug.org/sex before kissing 15-year-old girls dealing with boys.
We mentioned earlier J.D. Unwin's research about sex in culture. He studied 86 civilizations across many eras of history. He stated that whenever a culture embraced premarital sex and gave up marriage for life, that society would become dead or inert within 3 generations. 1960 introduced the advent of birth control and free sex. This was soon followed by no-fault divorce laws in the early 70s. If we consider a physical generation of people to be about 20 to 25 years, we are now closing in on the end of the 3rd generation, with the end point landing between 2020 and 2035. If Unwin is correct, then Western civilization will be dead within 10 years. The increasing tensions between the USA, Russia, and China, combined with the growing conflict in the Middle East, all tell us that time is running out. Rome's war on marriage and the Sabbath is about to reach its culmination. In the midst of an overwhelming tide comes a message which will restore the Sabbath and marriage. It starts by receiving Jesus as the only begotten Son of God, embracing his non-violent, non-condemning character, and letting him lead us to his loving Father. In this framework, we are now called to the biblical ideal for marriage, a lifelong union between 2 people, as a reflection of the eternal relationship of the Father and the Son.